Somewhere in a Chevy dealership parking lot in Ohio right now, there's a brand new Trax sitting with a dead engine and 11,581 miles on the odometer. The owner didn't off-road it, didn't tow anything. She was just driving to work when the dashboard lit up with reduced engine power. The truck started knocking, and it died rolling to a stop on the shoulder. That's not a rumor. That's paragraph 1 of an active federal lawsuit filed in Delaware. And that Trax is not alone. Right now, across 13 different engine families sold by 7 of the biggest car companies on Earth, there is a quiet, unglamorous crisis playing out that most car buyers have no idea about because it never makes the evening news. It shows up one recall notice at a time, one court filing at a time, one YouTube comment section full of furious owners at a time. Today, we're laying every single one of them out, brand by brand, engine by engine, with the actual numbers, the actual recall documents, and the actual court filings behind them. No guessing, no rumors, just what's really happening under the hood of the cars sitting on your street right now. Let's start with the one that should scare you the most, because it involves fire. Jeep, owned by Stellantis, has spent the back half of 2025 dealing with a nightmare buried inside its own engine block. In November 2025, Stellantis recalled roughly 112,859 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe and Wrangler 4xe plug-in hybrids. The cause wasn't a design flaw in the traditional sense. It was sand. Actual sand contamination left behind during the engine casting process at the factory. That sand can work its way through the engine over time and cause catastrophic internal failure, the kind that can knock a rod through the block. According to Stellantis' own investigation submitted to federal regulators, there have already been 36 confirmed engine fires, 50 incidents of total loss of propulsion, and 3 injuries tied directly to this defect. As of this recall, Stellantis still hadn't finalized a permanent repair. Owners were told to watch for engine knocking and warning lights, and wait for interim letters that started going out at the end of December 2025. If you own a 2023 through 2025 Grand Cherokee or Wrangler 4xe, this is not a maybe. This is a documented, government-filed safety recall with your name potentially on the list. Now let's cross the parking lot to Toyota, a brand that spent 40 years building a reputation on the idea that their trucks simply do not break. That reputation took a direct hit with the redesigned Tundra's 3.4-liter twin-turbo V6, the engine Toyota built specifically to replace the bulletproof V8. In May of 2024, Toyota recalled roughly 102,000 2022 and 2023 Tundras, along with related Lexus LX models, because of a manufacturing defect in the number 1 main bearing. Metal debris from that worn bearing can circulate through the entire engine and cause complete failure, sometimes with almost no warning beyond a knocking. Toyota's fix wasn't simple either. Engineers eventually developed a resonant frequency test just to determine which engines needed full replacement versus which could be saved, and reporting at the time suggested that inspection process could ultimately touch as many as 270,000 vehicles once every affected build was accounted for. And here's the part that should worry current owners even more. In 2026, Toyota issued yet another Tundra recall, this one covering over 43,000 vehicles for the same underlying engine concern. 3 years after the first recall, the same 3.4-liter engine was still generating fresh safety paper. Toyota's problems in 2026 weren't limited to trucks either. In December of 2025, Toyota issued a recall covering 51,644 Camry hybrids from model years 2025 and 2026. Plus 3,761 Corolla Cross Hybrid, all built between August and November of 2025. The issue here wasn't the combustion engine itself, but a bolt inside the hybrid inverter that could loosen, creating a short circuit risk that Toyota explicitly flagged as a potential fire hazard. Think about what that means. The Camry Hybrid is arguably the single safest, most boring, most trusted car in Toyota's entire lineup, the car recommended to first-time buyers and grandparents for 2 straight decades. And it just got hit with a fire risk recall on brand new stock still sitting on dealer lots. When even Toyota's most conservative, most proven models are generating fire risk paperwork in the same 90-day window, that tells you something about how thin the margin for error has become across this entire industry, not just at one automaker. Nissan's situation might be the most dramatic case of deja vu in the entire list. The 1.5-liter three-cylinder VC turbo engine, Nissan's variable compression showpiece found in the current Rogue, has now been recalled twice in less than a year. The first recall, issued in the middle of 2025, covered roughly 500,000 Rogues. Nissan came back in February of 2026 with a second recall covering more than 650,000 vehicles for a related concern, bringing the combined total across both campaigns to well over 640,000 affected Rogues, according to federal filings. The variable compression design, which is genuinely clever engineering on paper, appears to be struggling with high oil temperature in real-world use. When oil breaks down under that heat, bearings can seize, and the result is sudden, complete engine failure, sometimes at highway speed. To Nissan's credit, they didn't just issue a recall and walk away. They extended the powertrain warranty on affected vehicles to 10 years or 120,000 miles in the United States. That's a real substantial response. But it's also an admission. You don't extend a warranty by 6 extra years unless you already know internally that the failure rate is bad enough to justify. If you want the textbook example of a brand's reputation getting permanently attached to one engine, look no further than Hyundai and Kia's Theta 2. This is not a new story, and that's exactly the point. Since 2010, more than 3,100 Hyundai and Kia vehicles have caught fire, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, injuring over 100 people and killing one person. Over the past roughly 15 years, the two automakers have issued recall notices covering more than 10 million vehicles tied to fire risk, a huge portion of it connected to the Theta 2, New GDI, and Gamma GDI engine families. The mechanism is almost always the same story, with different vehicle names attached. A connecting rod bearing wears prematurely. The driver hears knocking or feels vibration. In the worst cases, the connecting rod actually punches through the engine block, spills oil onto a hot surface, and starts a fire. Regulators didn't treat this lightly either. In 2020, NHTSA hit the two companies with $210 million in civil penalties for failing to recall vehicles in a timely manner, and the whistleblower who helped expose the pattern was awarded $24 million, the largest such award in the agency's history at that point. Both companies have since settled a fresh round of class action litigation covering owners of specific Theta 2, New GDI, and Gamma GDI engines, offering extended warranties, reimbursements, and free inspections. If you own one of the affected models and haven't checked whether your engine qualifies for that lifetime warranty extension, that alone could be worth thousands of dollars to you. Kia's engine problems didn't stop at Theta 2, though, and this next one is happening right now, not a decade ago. In 2025, Kia recalled more than 137,000 Soul and Seltos models from model years 2021 through 2023, all built with 2-liter 4-cylinder engines sourced from Kia's Autoland Hwaseong plant. The problem was improperly manufactured piston oil rings, which can lead to excessive oil consumption, abnormal engine noise, stalling, and complete engine failure. Kia's own recall paperwork acknowledged 4 confirmed engine fires tied to this specific defect. Here's where it gets legally interesting. A Florida owner named Eric Jasinski filed a lawsuit arguing the recall itself, regardless of whether his personal engine had failed, had damaged the resale value and reliability perception of his Soul so badly that the car was effectively worthless. Kia tried to get the case thrown out, arguing the plaintiff hadn't suffered any actual mechanical failure and that federal regulators had already deemed the recall remedy appropriate. In early 2026, a federal judge denied that motion and let the case proceed. That doesn't mean Kia loses. It means the legal fight over what a recall actually does to a car's value, separate from whether the engine ever breaks, is now heading toward real courtroom scrutiny. General Motors deserves its own extended chapter here because it has, right now, 3 separate engine families under serious legal and regulatory pressure simultaneously. Start with the smallest one, GM's 1.2-liter turbocharged 3-cylinder, used in the Chevrolet Trax, Chevrolet Trailblazer, Buick Encore GX, and Buick Envista, is the subject of a class action filed in the United States District Court for the District of Delaware in early 2026. The lead plaintiffs, Samantha and Donna Cook, describe a scenario that's become disturbingly familiar in owner complaints. Their 2024 Trax threw a reduced power warning, started knocking loudly, and stalled with just under 11,600 miles on it. The dealership diagnosed a broken connecting. Then came the second problem. The replacement engine was back-ordered for months, leaving the vehicle undrivable and sitting on the lot. The lawsuit alleges GM has known about internal engine defects, including bearing and connecting rod damage and oil starvation, since at least 2022, and that dealers were instructed to tell customers their vehicles were operating normally when they weren't. As of this recording, there's no formal safety recall on this, just an active lawsuit and a documented pattern of failures well within the factory warranty. GM's second problem is bigger, older, and arguably more damaging to the brand's core identity because it involves the full-size truck engines that built General Motors' reputation in the first place. The 5.3-liter and 6.2-liter Ecotec 3 V8s, used across the Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, Yukon, and Escalade, have been the target of a class action originally filed back in 2021 over defective valve lifters tied to the cylinder deactivation system. The allegation is straightforward. Lightweight lifter components wear out faster than they should, and when they fail, they can destroy the camshaft and the rest of the valve train along with it, sometimes at very low mileage. 4 years later, as of December 2025, that lawsuit still hasn't been granted class certification, and GM still hasn't issued a formal recall, meaning owners have largely been paying for repairs out of pocket. What makes this particularly frustrating for truck owners is timing. GM is reportedly developing a new generation of V8s for the 2027 model year, which is good news for future buyers and cold comfort for anyone currently driving a truck built in the years this lawsuit actually covers. The third GM engine on this list already cost the company real money, which is worth noting because it's proof this isn't just internet noise. The 2.7-liter turbocharged four-cylinder, badged L3B and marketed as TurboMax, found in the Silverado in Colorado, was the subject of a class action alleging fractured engine blocks in certain 2023 model year trucks. That case reached a genuine resolution. A California federal judge granted final approval to a $150 million class action settlement against GM tied to this engine defect. $150 million is not a number companies pay to make a nuisance lawsuit go away quietly. That's a number that reflects a real, provable defect affecting a real number of trucks. Add up the 1.2-liter three-cylinder lawsuit still working through discovery, the 5.3 and 6.2 lifter case still fighting for class certification, and the $150 million settlement already paid out on the 2.7, and you have three separate engine families across GM's lineup, small, medium, and full-size, all facing serious documented legal exposure inside the same 18-month window. Honda's story is a little different because it's really two separate engines with two very different kinds of trouble. Start with the 1.5-liter turbocharged four-cylinder found in the Civic, CR-V, and Accord. When this engine first launched, the headline problem was oil dilution, gasoline leaking into the oil during short cold weather trips. Honda addressed that mostly through software. The bigger concern now is head gasket, where the seal between the engine block and cylinder head breaks down, letting coolant leak directly into the combustion chamber. When that happens, repair bills routinely climb into the thousands of dollars, and it's been reported at relatively low mileage on vehicles that should be nowhere near that kind of major repair. A proposed class action has already been filed in Canada, specifically alleging defective head gaskets across the Civic, CR-V, and Accord lineup, and American owners have been organizing their own complaints and legal inquiries in parallel. Honda's response so far has leaned on gradually phasing this engine out of newer trim levels as hybrid powertrains take over more of the lineup, rather than any broad, proactive warranty extension. Honda's second engine problem is arguably more serious because it's not a small commuter engine. It's the 3.5-liter V6 that powers the Pilot, Odyssey, Ridgeline, Passport, and several Acura models, vehicles that families specifically buy because they're supposed to be the safe, boring, reliable choice. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration escalated its investigation into this engine, now covering roughly 1.4 million vehicles, after receiving more than 400 reports of connecting rod bearing failures in 2016 through 2020 model year vehicles. This comes on top of an earlier recall, campaign number 23 V751, that already addressed a related crankshaft defect. The fact that federal investigators reopened and escalated this probe rather than closing it out after the original recall, tells you the first fix likely didn't fully solve the underlying problem. If you're driving a Honda or Acura minivan or midsize SUV from this era and you've never heard a word about this, that's exactly the problem. This is a 1.4 million vehicle federal investigation, and it has gotten a fraction of the media attention that a single Tesla headline gets in a slow news week. Volkswagen and Audi's shared 2-liter EA888 turbocharged 4-cylinder deserves a spot on this list, almost purely for its longevity as a problem child. This engine has been used across VW and Audi's lineup for well over a decade, and it finally produced a resolved class action settlement covering vehicles built from 2008 through 2024, an extraordinarily wide window that tells you the underlying issues weren't limited to one bad model year. The settlement addresses turbocharger failures directly, and it extends new vehicle limited warranties on Generation 3 settlement class vehicles out to 8.5 years or a mileage cap, effective from mid-September 2025, with a final approval hearing that took place on December 4th, 2025. Owners who paid for repairs at unauthorized shops can recover reimbursements as well. Beyond the turbo failures themselves, this engine has an independently well-documented history of excessive oil consumption tied to faulty piston rings, a problem severe enough in some cases that the only real fix is a full engine replacement, alongside recurring complaints about PCV valves, timing cover leaks, and water pumps. And here's the uncomfortable part for anyone shopping new right now. The current 2026 Tiguan still uses a version of this same architecture, and early owner reports suggest the concerns haven't fully disappeared just because the calendar changed. Ford closes out this list with 2 separate engine issues that stack on top of each other. The older, more litigated problem involves the 1.5, 1.6, and 2-liter EcoBoost engines used across the Escape, Fusion, Edge, and the related Lincoln MKC and MKZ from roughly 2013 through 2019. A class action lawsuit alleged that coolant could leak directly into the engine cylinders, a defect known as coolant intrusion, which can cause overheating and, in the worst cases, sudden engine seizure while driving. Ford ultimately reached a settlement in the case known as Miller versus Ford Motor Company. Separately, and much more recently, Ford issued a fresh recall in 2026 covering 255,404 vehicles, primarily Focus models from 2012 through 2018, over a canister purge valve that can stick open and cause the engine to stall or fail to restart. What makes this one particularly awkward for Ford is that this was actually the second recall attempt to fix this exact canister purge valve problem, after the first attempted software fix apparently didn't fully resolve it. 2 swings at the same defect, on cars that are now, in some cases, well over a decade old, and Ford is still writing recall paperwork for it in 2026. So step back and look at the shape of all 13 of these stories together, because the pattern matters more than any single engine. This isn't one bad company or one unlucky model year. This is Stellantis, Toyota, Nissan, Hyundai, Kia, General Motors, Honda, Volkswagen, and Ford, essentially every major volume brand selling in the American market, all dealing with serious government-documented engine defects at the same time. And there's a reason for that. And I'll flag clearly that this next part is my own read on the situation, not a cited fact. In my view, as someone who follows this industry closely, the common thread across nearly every one of these 13 engines is the same industry-wide bet made roughly a decade ago. Smaller displacement, more turbocharging, tighter tolerances, and cylinder deactivation, all chasing fuel economy regulations and emissions targets, often without giving those new designs the same multi-year real-world durability runway that the simpler, larger engines they replaced had already earned. Regulators reward the numbers on a fuel economy sticker. They don't reward the engine still running perfectly at 150,000 miles. And when an entire industry optimizes for the metric that gets measured on day 1 instead of the one that gets measured on day 3,000, this is what it eventually looks like. The independent data backs up the broader trend, even if it can't speak to any single engine by name. J.D. Power's 2026 U.S. Vehicle Dependability Study, covering vehicles after 3 years of ownership, recorded an industry average of 204 problems per 100 vehicles, the highest number since the study was redesigned in 2022, and an increase of 2 problems per 100 vehicles over the prior year. Volkswagen came in dead last among all 30 brands measured at 301 problems per 100 vehicles, with Chrysler, Jeep, and Audi rounding out the bottom of the list. Lexus, for the 4th consecutive year, ranked highest overall among premium brands, and Buick topped the mass market segment for the 2nd year running. Notice something important. This study measures overall dependability across every system in the car, not just engines, and infotainment and software issues are actually the single biggest driver of the increase. But engines and powertrains remain a real and separately tracked category. And when you're talking about connecting rods punching through blocks and cars catching fire in driveways, that's a different category of problem than a glitchy touchscreen. Both are happening, both are getting worse, and both are eroding the same trust. So what do you actually do if your car is on this list? Because panic is not a strategy. First, and this is the single most important sentence in this entire video, go to NHTSA.gov/recalls right now, type in your 17-digit VIN, and see exactly what's open on your specific. Don't trust a dealer's word. Don't trust a used car listing that says no open recalls. Check it yourself because that database is free, it's official, and it takes about 30 seconds. Second, if your engine falls into one of the class action settlements we covered today, specifically the Hyundai and Kia Theta 2 family or the Volkswagen and Audi EA888 turbocharger settlement, go check whether you qualify for reimbursement on repairs you already paid for out of pocket. That's real money sitting on the table for a lot of owners who don't even know the settlement exists yet. Third, if you're currently shopping and cross-referencing this list against a car you're about to buy, that doesn't automatically mean walk away. It means ask the dealer directly which specific recall campaigns have already been completed on that VIN. Get it in writing and factor an extended powertrain warranty into your negotiation if the engine you're looking at is one of the 13 we just went through. Here's my honest final take. And again, this is opinion, not reporting. None of these 13 engines mean the sky is falling on the American auto industry, and none of them mean every single unit built will fail. Millions of these exact vehicles are being driven every single day without a single problem. What this list actually represents is something quieter and, frankly, more useful to you as a buyer. Proof that the era of blindly trusting a badge on the hood is over. Toyota's name alone used to be enough. Honda's name alone used to be. That's not really true anymore. And the data backs that up, whether the story is comfortable or not. The engines that are holding up the best across this entire list tend to share 2 traits. Proven, naturally aspirated architecture with years of real-world mileage behind them, or well-established hybrid systems that have had time to mature past their first generation of teething problem. If you remember nothing else from the next 20 minutes of your life, remember that one line, because it will save you more money than any other single piece of car buying advice you'll hear this year. If this actually changed how you're going to check your own car before your next long road trip, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe because next week we're going deep on the J.D. Power 2026 numbers brand by brand, including exactly which companies are quietly getting better while everyone's attention is on the ones that are falling apart. And if you know somebody driving one of these 13 engines who has genuinely no idea any of this is happening, do them an actual favor and send them this video. It might be the 30 minutes that saves them from an $8,000 engine replacement bill 6 months from now.